Hey there, it's Julie Hutchison here from Think, Be, Do Leadership, and it is day 12 already of Team on Fire. 31 days of hints and tips on how to lead your team, how to get the best performance out of your team. And today we are talking about who do you need to be so that your team show up the way you want them to. Funny old question, don't you think? But this has been because well, not for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is because I was reminded of this this morning on the radio when a lady, and I can't remember, she's like in a podcast and was talking about her, talking about relationships actually, and she was talking about her husband, and she didn't like the way he was and the way he showed up, and she was moaning about him. Oh, she was telling us the story of how she was moaning about him, and she was pulled up on it, and she was asked the question, not how can I get him to, which is what she was asking, not how can I get him to be more like I want him to be, but that person asking her the question says, who do you need to be so that he shows up the way you want him to be? Wow. I thought, I'm going to sneeze any second, by the way. Apologies if I do. Am I going to... Oh, excuse me. Yes, wow. Anyway, I was shouting at the radio like, yes, exactly that point, because it's not just about us moaning and groaning about how people behave. It's about understanding, why are they behaving that way? What's the impact that I'm having on them? And how can I change that? So I want to talk about that today, because it's exactly the same, not just for our partners, although it is really, pretty good. But it's exactly the same with our teams, with anybody who's around us. The influence that we have on people is going to be the response that we get. So it's all too easy to complain or moan about, performance of people and how they show up and what they're doing or they're not doing. And you find that's not just you as the boss moaning about people. I suppose it's about people moaning about people all over the place. We're always looking outwards and saying, oh, Bob didn't do this, and or why didn't they do that? And actually, maybe we need to look slightly differently at the situation. So that's what I want to talk about today. Thank you, Katie. I've just seen your I've seen your little thing there. Bless me. Thank you for my sneeze. So what are we talking about? So we want to look at, the impact that we have. So the outcomes that we get is because of the impact that we're having. And I've probably told you all before, but I'm going to tell you again that I was a police officer for a long time. And one of the things that I always say is, in forensics, they say that every contact leaves a trace. And I mean that if you, in a policing sense, it would mean, you put your I was going to say mother-in-law, but I shan't say that, in the boot of the car, and then you get rid, and I didn't say that, but you do, and you get rid, and you think you've got rid of the body, and there's nothing in the boot of the car. And the problem is that every contact leaves a trace. So when you put something into something, when it touches, it's going to leave a trace. It's going to leave something of that in the boot of the car, even though you think you've cleaned it. And exactly the same happens when you touch somebody human. Physically, but behaviorally, when you have a relationship with somebody, when you're having a conversation with somebody, when you're listening or you're doing something, or an email, whatever it is, every contact leaves a trace. And what we mean is that every time you have an interaction, there's an impact, even if you think there isn't. And even if you think it might be very small, it probably isn't, from the other person's perspective. And sometimes we don't even notice the impact that we're having. And therefore we think we haven't had any, maybe we think we've had a positive impact when we've actually had a negative impact. And we have no clue about that because we're not looking at it like that. We think it doesn't matter, that, that one little grumpy answer or that little quick remark, we think that doesn't really matter. And the problem is that is the sort of thing that people will one, will leave a trace on them, and two, will make them think, do I or do I not want to work with that person? And therefore defines the relationship and the behavior that you're seeing, if that makes sense. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Well, as a leader, that the big thing is that leadership's not a qualification. It's a product of the behaviors that you display, and that either help or hinder people to do the job around you. Okay, so we're here because we're leaders. We're here because we want people to step up and work on the project, whatever it is. yet they're not going to if you and your behaviors and the way you think are having a negative impact. So you can know as much as you like about leadership. You can read as much as you like about it. You can think that you're a great leader, but unless the way in which you show up is having a positive impact on people, then you aren't. So, to know and not to do is not to know, as they say. In other words, you have to put it into action. You have to behave in a certain way. Okay, so in and of itself, if you recognize that it doesn't matter what your knowledge is, it doesn't matter whether you have a high knowledge technically or you have a high knowledge of leadership, none of that matters if you're not out there putting it into place every day and building relationships. Okay. Secondly, we have to recognize this reaction interaction, in that whatever you're getting is possibly because of you or because of somebody else. So obviously there's millions of reactions and interactions with people every day, unless you only see one person every day. But let's just imagine, you're bobbing off people, you're there having conversations or emails or something, and you're having an impact on people all the time. And the impact that you have on Katie, since you're here, Katie, will then impact on somebody else when Katie goes to speak to somebody else. And so it's like a chain reaction of how people feel, the way in which they behave. If you've ever read the book Chaos Theory, it's a bit like that, because it's like what they call a butterfly effect of this impact on this, on this, on this. And what they're talking about is a butterfly flapping their wings. I can't remember where they said it. I don't know. Let's use Peterborough because it's really not that exciting. So a butterfly flapping its wings in Peterborough could end up with a tsunami in Thailand because of the impact, the ongoing effect as it grows. And in chaos theories is that it actually impacts on more things, and then the reactions carry on until it gets really huge. Well, if we were to take this slightly weird example into our businesses, it's all there. Chaos theory is all there in business, because you've got you make you come in the morning and you're a bit of a grump, and you snap at the receptionist, for example, let's just say, and then the receptionist is like, well, how dare you, and now the receptionist has got a grump on and thinks that everybody's against her. So the next person that walks through the door, maybe it's a client, gets it from the receptionist. We've all seen that in doctors' surgeries. So then the client gets it, and the client's like, oh, how dare you. So then the client speaks to the cleaner, I don't know, in a snotty way, and then the cleaner goes around the rest of the building and is super miserable, and I don't know, now I've lost track of people. I don't know, somebody in the canteen gets done, and then eventually it gets back and everybody's as miserable as anything. And you look at, where did that come from? And it's come from you, potentially. And the positive way of looking at that is that it's this is exactly the same the other way around. The butterfly effect, if you have a positive interaction with somebody, means that the way they're going to respond is going to be more positive, and they respond to other people. So chaos theory works both ways. But you probably wouldn't call it chaos, I suppose. It's a good book, though. If you ever want to read a book, read that one. It's a bit long, but I found it very interesting. So we have to recognize that these interactions we're having are actually the start of something. And yes, you could say, well, Bob started it, but you're the boss. You're the leader. So we have to take responsibility for stopping it or realigning it. At some point, somebody's got to do that, and we're going to rely on you to do that because you're the one watching this, and so this is down to you. And the thing is, if you think about this, if we stop and get really a really good understanding of how we're showing up, what is the impact of me? Do I show up in a collaborative way? Do I encourage communication? Do I make people feel safe and welcome and happy and clear on their roles and all of those things? Tick X boxes that you want. If I'm doing that, then what's the impact of that? Is that going to have a positive response? And you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see people are more engaged and they more want to do a job for you, and all will be culturally will be feeling much more happy and productive because people feel good. And equally, you're gonna, if you really truly look and ask yourself the question, how do I show up? And the answer isn't as you would like it to be, if you're being honest. Or you could ask somebody who's willing to be honest with you. if you really truly do that and say, how do I show up? What do you think the impact of me is? Honestly, can you give me some examples? You're going to start to recognize where maybe, might be just some of the things that you do aren't so useful in terms of building collaboration and trust amongst your team. And the minute you know about that is the minute you can do something about it. Because, okay, when you don't know, you go along in life and you show up how you show up, and we aren't on understanding of our impact. Well, okay, you could use that as an excuse if you like. But when somebody's giving you some feedback, or you've really sat down and just asked yourself that big girl pants question or big boy pants question, then and the minute you must do something about it, and ask yourself, how far does that effect go, that butterfly effect or that chaos effect of, if I'm grumpy at dinner or whatever, then that makes the next person grumpy. If I do this, how far does it go across your business? And that's what builds culture. Okay, so how you're showing up is going to build the culture of the organization, which in turn you're going to complain about if you don't like it, because if it starts to be negative, it'll be hard. You'll be hard pushed to actually sort of get it back to you and to understand that it came from you. But the reality is it could well have done. Yeah. So we need to get real with the impact that we have, get some feedback, answer that question. How do I need to show up so that I get the kind of people in my business that I want to be around? And we can't ask them to change their behavior if we're not willing to look at our own behavior. Yeah. Now, behavior breeds from where we think and all of our values and our beliefs and all those things. But there's a whole lot more to that. And that's what we teach on our Leaders Launchpad program and our Team on Fire program. So there's more to it than that about how do we actually do this. But the premise is still there. You can do this if you just sit down with a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever and ask yourself some, big boy and big girl pants questions. Then you are able to get that information that you need. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to understand that our behavior breeds the behavior of the people around us. And it's teams, it's relationships at home, it's your kids, it's everybody. And the minute we understand this, the minute we can say, actually, I'm going to design what I want. And this is the absolutely amazing part, is because then you've got behavior by design. And I don't mean forcing people in. What I mean is that you recognize that if it's a positive output that you get, that's a positive input to that person, in which case they're going to give you a positive output. Yeah. So you're building and building and building on that butterfly effect. Okay, my lovelies, thank you very much. I've talked too much now. If you found that useful and you think, yep, that's great, we've got 31 days of Team on Fire this month. And if you want to find out how to implement some of these strategies and these ideas, then give us a shout, message me, and we can show you how you can be part of our program. And we'll see you tomorrow for another episode of Team on Fire. You take care. I'm Julie Hutchison from Think, Be, Do Leadership.